Have you ever stopped to think about what actually makes you, well, you? We all like to imagine we're the captains of our own ship, in total control of our beliefs and our choices. But what if I told you that the biggest forces shaping who you are hidden in every single conversation, every interaction, every single day? To really get to the bottom of this, we have to start small. We have to start with the self.
Okay, so let me introduce you to Fernando. He's a university student, and he's got this fire in his belly. He wants to change the world, you know? He wants to take on the big stuff: injustice, poverty, violence. So he signs up for a social psychology class, thinking, this is it. This is where I'll get the tools. But a couple of months in, that excitement has pretty much turned into pure frustration.
Fernando is just not seeing the connection. He feels like the class is totally missing the point. He wants to talk about massive societal problems, not, why people like each other. He's so over it, he's ready to just walk out. But here's the thing. What if those tiny little details are the key to the whole puzzle? What if Fernando is about to leave right before the most important lesson of all?
To really get at what Fernando is missing, we have to do the exact thing he didn't want to do. We've got to look inward. Our sense of who we are, our identity, isn't something we just dream up on our own in some kind of vacuum. Nope, it's actually built piece by piece through our interactions with other people.
Psychologists have a name for this collection of beliefs about ourselves. It's called your self-concept. And this is where it gets really interesting. We don't just invent this stuff. We actually build this picture of who we are using the exact same mental tools we use to form impressions of other people. It's almost like we're looking in a mirror, but the mirror is made up of everyone we've ever met.
Look, for some things, it's easy to know where you stand. You run a race, you look at the stopwatch. Boom, that's a hard number and objective reality. But what about the stuff that really makes us who we are? Like, are you a compassionate person? Are you a good leader? There's no stopwatch for that, right? The only way to get a sense of it is to look around and compare yourself to others. That's the theory of social comparison. And it points to this kind of mind-bending paradox of being human. To truly understand yourself on the inside, you have to constantly be looking outside.
Okay, so we need other people to understand ourselves. But how in the world do we understand them? Every single day, we are bombarded with a crazy amount of social information. To handle it all, our brains have come up with these clever little mental shortcuts. But, as you're about to see, these shortcuts, well, they have a dark side. They can easily become traps.
So, the first shortcut is the stereotype. Now, it's important to remember this is just a thinking process, a cognitive thing. So, let's say a tourist from a certain country is rude to you one time. Your brain, which just loves being efficient, might create a new rule in your head. Okay, people from that country are rude. It's a generalization based on, one piece of data. It's a fast way to categorize the world, but you can see how it's built on some seriously shaky ground.
Now, what happens when you pour emotion all over that mental shortcut? When that thought, people from that country are rude, gets mixed up with a feeling, like fear or anger. That's when it morphs into prejudice. So the stereotype is the belief. The prejudice is the negative feeling that the belief creates.
And this is where it gets really insidious. See, once a prejudice takes hold, our brain doesn't just sit back and let it be. It goes on the defensive. It starts this process called selective perception, which is basically like putting on blinders. Your brain becomes a detective that is only looking for clues that prove its first theory was right, and it will ignore, explain away, or completely forget a mountain of evidence that shows it's wrong.
So our view of other people is already filtered. But what about how we explain why they do the things they do, especially when something goes wrong? This leads us to something called attribution theory, which I personally like to call the blame game.
This shows a huge bias in how we make sense of the world. Just think about it. Someone cuts you off in traffic. What's your first thought? What a selfish jerk, right? You blame their actions on who they are as a person, an internal flaw. But when you're the one who cuts someone off, oh, it's a different story. I didn't see them, or I'm super late for this really important meeting. You blame your mistake on the situation, on external factors. It's the exact same action, but we come up with two totally different explanations.
This deep-seated instinct to protect our own ego is called the self-serving bias. And it follows a really simple but very powerful formula. My successes? That's all me. That's my talent, my hard work. My failures? Oh, that was the situation. It was bad luck. It was definitely someone else's fault. It's like a shield we carry around for our ego.
Okay, let's zoom in on this for a second, because it's basically a map of how we generate our emotions. A researcher named Bernard Weiner figured out that we analyze things along these three key dimensions. So let's say you get a big promotion. If you think the cause was internal, because you're skilled, stable, you're always skilled, and controllable, you worked for it, you're going to feel a ton of pride. But let's flip it. Say someone you know loses their job. If you think the cause is internal, stable, but uncontrollable, like a chronic health issue, you're way more likely to feel pity instead of anger. These three simple questions pretty much dictate our entire emotional reaction to everything that happens.
So, we've dug into our inner world, how we see ourselves, how we judge others. But how does all that thinking and feeling actually translate into doing stuff? The really important bridge between our private thoughts and our public actions is what we call our attitudes.
So you can think of any attitude you have as being made up of three parts. First, there's the cognitive part. That's what you think or believe. Second, the affective part. That's how you feel about it. And third, the behavioral part. That's what you're inclined to do about it. And, in a perfect world, these three things are all singing in harmony. But a lot of the time, they're at war with each other.
Let me show you exactly how these things can clash, using a classic example. We'll start with a really simple belief, a fact that pretty much everyone agrees on. I know that smoking is extremely unhealthy. It's a clear, logical thought.
But then, we introduce a behavior that's in total opposition to that belief. The same person smokes a pack of cigarettes every single day. So now, the thought, "this is killing me," is in a direct fight with the action of lighting another one up. This clash creates this really uncomfortable mental static inside your head, a deep discomfort that we call cognitive dissonance.
So, the million-dollar question is, what's gonna give? The human mind just can't stand that kind of conflict for long. It has to fix the tension. But how does it do it? Does it change the behavior? Or does it change the belief?
Well, it turns out the most powerful, lasting changes happen through something called self-persuasion. When a person has to resolve that dissonance for themselves, when they have to come up with their own reasons to quit smoking to match their belief, that change is deep and it sticks. It is so much more effective than anyone nagging them or pressuring them because the drive to change comes from the inside out.
And this brings us right back to Fernando. We've gone deep into the self, into how we see people, how we explain their behavior, and how our attitudes work. Now it's time to scale all of this up. Because these exact same processes don't just happen inside one person's head. They define how entire groups, and ultimately, entire societies work. The foundation of any group that actually works, whether it's a championship sports team or a world-changing social movement, is cohesion. The best way to think about it is like a social glue that holds everybody together. It's all the different forces, liking each other, having a common goal, a shared identity, that make people want to stay part of the group.
And the power of this social glue is just massive. When cohesion is high, people aren't just happier to be there. They talk to each other more, they're more productive, and the group's influence over each individual gets way stronger. This is the engine that drives everything. These strong bonds, built on the very psychological ideas we've been talking about, are what turn a bunch of separate individuals into a single, powerful force for change.
Let's just go back to Fernando's frustration one last time. He thought that studying things like why people are attracted to each other and how we judge one another was completely irrelevant to solving big problems like injustice. But does it still sound so irrelevant now?
Because here's the ultimate takeaway. Prejudice starts with a simple stereotype, a mental shortcut. Conflict often begins with an attribution error, a mistake in the blame game. Real social change is driven by shifts in attitude, powered by self-persuasion. And all powerful movements are built on group cohesion. The giant picture of society is made up of all these tiny psychological pixels. So, to solve the world's biggest problems, Fernando and all of us have to start by understanding the social self.